Hey everyone, it's Chris Loud. In this video, we're going to create expressive abstract art with muted colors and texture. We'll be working in threes, 3 colors, plus as always, I allow myself to use black and white, 3 textures, 3 layers, and finally 3 shapes that tie it all together. The power of threes is a simple framework, but one that gives us a lot of freedom to explore and discover along the way. And before we jump in, I want to give a big thank you to Barbara, Kathy, and AB for their generous super thanks donations. Your support really helps us keep creating together, so thank you very much. At the end of the video, I'll show a couple of other pieces I did this week using muted colors and textures with some variations. I'll also show close-ups of this one and the final piece in different orientations, as well as a couple floral paintings using some similar techniques. So we'll start with texture. For this piece, I used crumpled newsprint, a scrap of cardboard, and Mars Black paint stamped with bubble wrap. But there are so many easy ways we can add texture. Scraping paint with an old gift card, pressing in fabric or lace, using a stencil with modeling paste, or even pulling paint with a plastic bag. Texture does 2 big things for our art. It gives the surface a tactile energy that makes us want to look closer, and it creates surprises that we can respond to in the next layers. Instead of starting with a blank flat surface, we've already got something that's alive and interesting. So you can see I've already put down the Mars Black paint, and I pressed bubble wrap into that. I put down kind of the inside ribbed portion of cardboard, and then some crumpled up newsprint. And right now I'm just taking a wet wipe and trying to wipe a little bit of the paint away from that Mars Black, but without much success. I already let this dry for about 5 minutes, and I used a hair dryer for a couple of minutes of that. It's still not perfectly dry, the newsprint and the cardboard, but pretty close. So you can see my colors on the right there. I've got Naples Yellow, burnt Sienna, burnt Umber, Mars Black, and titanium white. And I'm doing this on 145 pound or 250 GSM mixed media paper. I'll leave a list of all the materials I'm using in the description below. Next, we're adding our muted colors. I'm layering burnt Sienna, burnt Umber, Mars Black, and just a touch of Naples Yellow over the texture. The important part is that we don't completely cover what's underneath. Letting some of the first layer peek through creates depth and atmosphere. So working with muted colors is powerful because it allows the texture and the marks to take center stage. The quieter palette gives us space and really gives us space to notice subtle shifts and the interplay between layers. So I'll show you here in just a few seconds a little close-up at a different angle so you can kind of see what the textures are that I'm working with now that we created through that first layer, and then adding that second layer of color, which will help the lighter layer that we work on next really kind of show and pop just a little bit. So here is that layer. You can see the bubble wrap there. And it's just light, but it will work and come through. And then you can also see some of the ribbing, some of the newsprint, and some of that crumpled texture that we have there. And again, that will come into play here once we start putting the Naples Yellow and titanium white down. So for the third layer, we're brushing on that mix of like I said, Naples Yellow and titanium white, but I'm keeping the paint thin and loose. The reason I like working in thin layers is that it allows the previous stages to breathe through. Instead of completely covering what we did before, those earlier marks and textures still have a voice in the final piece. And thin paint also creates interesting transparencies, almost like veils. So we can build atmosphere without losing that history underneath. So all of these paints that I'm using are opaque, but by using them in thin layers, you can see some of the previous layers peeking through. And to do that, I'm using color shapers. I'm using this brayer that you'll see me pull out several times to keep thinning that layer and help spread that paint. But the brayer also gives an interesting texture. And right there, a little bit of that newsprint started coming up because it still was a little bit wet. So I'm putting down a little bit of paint to help kind of seal that down. But you know what? That just adds more texture, so it's really not a big deal. You can see that I've started the shape portion of this and added just 3 random shapes. Another benefit of thin layers is that they give us flexibility. If something feels too heavy, we can soften it. If an area looks flat, we can glaze over it and instantly add depth. It's a way of keeping the painting open and responsive rather than locking it down too soon. And as artists, exercises like this are where we really grow, by deliberately working with threes. 3 layers, 3 textures, 3 shapes, and 3 colors. We give ourselves structure, but also freedom inside that structure. We're training our eye to notice how layers interact, how textures change the mood, and how restraint with color can make a piece more powerful. It's practice in decision making and observation, which are some of the most valuable skills we can develop in abstract painting. So, like I said, to bring it all together, we'll add these 3 shapes, kind of rough shapes. And I'm using charcoal, a charcoal pencil, as well as a charcoal stick. And now I'm using a stick with Mars Black paint because I want a rough outline, and I'm going to continue to kind of circle around these to add some extra lines, and which will kind of give these a little bit of movement. And, you know, these shapes anchor the painting. They give structure and rhythm to all the texture and color. They don't need to be perfect, and these aren't perfect. The beauty comes from how they interact with what's already there. So I add a little bit more paint. I wipe away some paint in some areas. I'm also going to bring in a couple of extra colors here, using the Artex acrylic paint markers that I have. I think it's kind of a deep orange and kind of a medium yellow, and just put a hint of those colors down and spread those with my fingers to kind of help those blend in with that burnt sienna. And you can see that I'm wearing 2 finger covers on my right hand, and I'm doing that for 2 reasons. One, I get a lot of comments about me taking care of myself and not touching all these toxic acrylic paints, and you know, that's, you can read about the toxicity of paint, acrylic paint. I've read enough about it that I feel comfortable, you know, touching it with my skin, that it's not going to really cause me too much. I shouldn't say too much, any harm really, but you know, it can't hurt to wear a glove or those finger coverings. And then the other thing is, gosh, it really helps when you're cleaning up. I usually wash those on my hand and then I pull them off and I can reuse those. But those 2 fingers are typically the fingers that I touch the paint with. So, but I appreciate the concern from people with, you know, my health and touching these paints. So I do appreciate that. So working with 3s, 3 textures, 3 colors, 3 layers, and 3 shapes keeps our process simple but effective. It pushes us to think about variety and balance without overwhelming us with too many choices. And for artists, you know, this kind of exercise is invaluable. It trains us to make decisions, to notice how layers interact, and to see how structure emerges from experimentation. The repetition of 3s builds confidence, and it reminds us that we don't need endless supplies or complicated steps to make something expressive and engaging. And here I'm bringing in those markers there. And plus, you know, some of you might remember the animated show Schoolhouse Rock, and there is that song "Three is a Magic Number," so you know you can't go wrong with threes. But I love working in threes. It just like I said, kind of simplifies things. So do I love this composition? No, I don't. I mean, I like the two kind of more rounded shapes. I don't really care for the flatter shape at the bottom. I might do something later to play with that. I might not. I might let this sit and it might grow on me some more. So that's the exercise process today. A textured, layered, abstract, built on a framework of threes. By using muted colors, we gave space for texture to shine. By layering, we created depth. And by adding shapes, we grounded the whole piece in composition. So I'm going to show you some close-ups so we can really see how the textures and layers interact. And if you like this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, feel free to subscribe. And as always, if you have any feedback or questions, I'd love for you to leave me a comment. And if you try this exercise, share in the comments what threes you chose and what surprised you along the way. So I'm continuing to work with these shapes a little bit and trying to pull something out because I kind of felt like there was something missing here. And by adding this little burnt umber area and kind of pulling the paint back, it helped kind of create almost like a broken stripe across that middle there. And I think that really helped with the composition of this. Now, obviously, the focal point for me is in that upper left third, that kind of the brighter orange and burnt sienna and yellow that are kind of mixed together. I think those obviously kind of draw your eye in. And, you know, going from left to right, that's kind of the first thing you see, and then it kind of pulls you into the rest of the painting. But like I said, the lower portion I'm not a huge fan of. So I can see myself picking this back up and playing with that again. But, you know, these were fun exercises. So I'll show you the other two pieces that I worked on. Now, you can see there it looks like four shapes in this, but really one of them I feel like is intersected by the white square. So there's more than, you know, I shouldn't say there's more than three. There's three. Here's another piece, kind of similar, rounded shapes. But really enjoyed this one. I think this one worked out really well. Again, kind of a central focal point. So here's some of those close-ups I was talking about, and you can see some of those textures, some of the newsprint peeking through, the bubble wrap, and how that played into the final piece. And here is the final piece, and I'll show you some different orientations there. I think the first orientation probably works the best, at least in my opinion. But you tell me if you think differently. So here are those flower pieces, the floral pieces I worked on as well. So thank you so much for watching, and keep on painting.